Don't stop.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me on the Everything and Anything and a Bit Gay podcast. I'm your host, Zach Randall Friedman. And before I get into today's guest, I want to talk to you about something I was thinking about this morning. I was thinking about the podcast interviews that I have today. I have 3 podcast interviews today, and I have a news segment I need to do today because there's lots of LGBTQ plus news. If you weren't aware, I do another podcast called Listen Up Girl, and I do news at least 6 days a week now. So check it out. It's on all podcast platforms and YouTube. But I did a lot over the past kind of week on things on my show, trying to think about things I could do to not necessarily improve, but just change and make different. And I guess improve a bit, or things that I was evaluating, I would say. And it kind of like struck me this weekend, which is kind of strange after doing this for more than 2.5 years. And leaving my corporate job in March to kind of pursue doing a podcast full time. But it struck me that I've become like this LGBTQ plus podcaster. And I'll tell you why it struck me. Because 2 people actually in the past month have sent me DMs or text or emails saying, hey, you interviewed me before in your show. Loved being on your show. It was great. I'm trying to find other LGBTQ plus shows that do interviews and not just like do monologues or talk with a co-host or do the news. And I don't really know of any shows. And not that my show is completely dedicated to LGBTQ plus, but the name of my show is And a Bit Gay. So, and I have a rainbow in my logo. For both of my shows. Listen Up Girl, I mean, that's a news show that you can't get any more gay than saying, hey girl, listen up, I got the news for you. So yeah, it just kind of struck me that, did I ever think that I would be kind of representing LGBTQ plus people on a podcast? And no, definitely not on a podcast, but did I ever think I don't want to say I'm the voice on the podcast, but I'm one of the voices of LGBTQ plus people, community on a podcast. And yeah, sometimes it's just like, I just was going through my mind thinking, how did I get here? Like, how did this happen? And would I have picked a different name for my podcast is the other thing. And I definitely would have, because Everything and Anything and a Bit Gay is so long. And I need something that's like 3 words long, but I'm not changing the name of my podcast at this point. But yes, I would revisit the name, and I was just going to do Everything and Anything. But there was another show, I think that it stopped in 2021 or something. And so I didn't want to repeat somebody else's show, even though you're allowed to, I think, especially since their show's not on anymore. But I didn't do it. So this is where I'm at. But again, the whole thing just baffles me how I went from 10 years ago being a person that didn't necessarily talk about myself being a gay person openly in public. I mean, not that people didn't know, but I wasn't coming in every day saying, hey girl, hey, I'm here, to, pushing a show across all podcast platforms and YouTube and promoting it and trying to get people to listen to it. So yeah, what a journey this has been. So I'm very proud of this show though. And I'm very happy about the people I get to speak to. I mean, I get to speak to some amazing people. And I feel so fortunate that I get to speak to all these unique people. I feel like my guests I'm going into like a different realm of guest at this point too. I'm able to kind of speak to people who I really want to speak to and who have something interesting to say. And not that the people before didn't have something, but I think I took people before that I didn't necessarily like. I'm like, oh, yeah, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to interview at first either. So it's not like I didn't like the people. I just maybe didn't know how to interview them, or it wasn't necessarily a subject that I was so interested in. Now I really I'm talking with people who I see there's an interest that way the conversation flows. Because if I don't have an interest in the conversation, you can tell right away. And the conversation just kind of fizzles towards the end. And it's usually a very short interview. I've done like 20-minute interviews. So, because I'm like, what else is there to talk about? Like we talked about, I don't know, your kids or whatever we were talking about. Anyway, that's my rant for today. And I have a great guest. His name is Matt Cain. He's a writer, a broadcaster, a publisher, and a leading commentator on LGBTQ plus issues. And he was Channel 4's, which is in the UK, first culture editor-in-chief of Attitude magazine. He's had a very great career. He was super friendly, great person to interview. I'm glad he came on. He has a new book out. I'm really happy I got to help him promote it and that I can continue to helping him promote it. Again, Matt Cain, check him out. His website is mattcainwriter.com. I'll put all those notes in the description of this video or podcast so you can check him out and buy his book. I bought it. It's great. Great book. He has a couple books out, and I bought 2 of them, I believe, so far. So, yeah, love Matt Cain. Loved the interview. Loved him. So check him out. And thanks so much for listening. And I'll be back with more guests later this week. Thanks. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me in the Everything and Anything and a Bit Gay podcast. Today, I have a brand new guest. He is an author. He is in London, England today, and I'm really happy to have Matt Cain on the show. So welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you for having me, Zach.
So I have lots of things I want to know about you. I want to first talk about, you grew up in England.
Yeah.
Near Manchester, is that where you said?
Yeah.
And so were you open? Like, when did you know that you were a gay kid or a gay person? At what age?
Well, actually, first thing I will do, Zach, is just qualify. I did grow up near Manchester, you're right. But a lot of your viewers and listeners will think of Manchester as a gay mecca, a very liberal city. It absolutely is. But I grew up in small towns, only about 20 minutes away on the train, but very working class, post-industrial towns. They were very tough environments. And before the internet, I'm 51 now.
Good for you.
I hope that doesn't mean everybody switches off. I'm 51 now.
I'm 53, so they don't switch off for me.
Good age. Oh my God, you're looking good.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, they all listen to me, so they're not going anywhere.
Well, back me up, Zach. But when we were growing up and there was no internet, our world felt much smaller.
Yes.
And what we could access. So I grew up in small towns. And then when I was 16, 17, 18, I started getting the train into Manchester, where there is an incredible, not only is there an incredible gay village and Canal Street, the very famous queer area. And in those days, physical bars and clubs were a huge part of a gay life.
Yeah.
But it was a very kind of modern, dynamic, liberal city, very creative. So that kind of set me free. But your first question was, when did I know? Well, The truth is, as you can tell from listening to my voice, I was very presenting as a gay child.
Okay.
So I didn't even know what gay meant. And I was being told by the other kids, well, first of all, they used to call me a girl.
Oh, I got that too.
Did you get that too?
Yeah.
They can only use that as an insult if they think being a girl is bad. And this was a very macho environment. All the boys played football and had fights. I didn't. I liked to play dolls with the girls, listen to pop music. I was a freak. I was savaged for being a girl, and then for being girly, and then for being gay. And this was the height of the HIV/AIDS crisis, when people thought gay men were dangerous, deviant, sexual predators, spreading disease. Gay meant death, unhappiness. People were disgusted by us. There were no positive role models on TV and the mainstream media, or very few. And yeah, I was kind of told I was gay before I even knew what it was.
So did your family ever ask you, or like, how did you come out to them?
They never asked me, my family, but there were lots of my behavior and my identity were problematic because I was bullied savagely. And so they tried to, I say I didn't have any positive role models. They didn't see any positive representations of queerness. my mum and dad, who were a generation above me. So they thought being gay was the worst possible thing. They were
Yeah.
told it was a choice. So they tried to steer me away from it. They tried to get me to play sports and all that stuff. I was banned from playing with the girls at school because boys just didn't do that. So nobody played with me, basically. And I, it was always there that I was different and it was a problem. I was never asked directly if I was gay, people just didn't talk about it in those days.
Yeah.
Were you directly asked if you were gay when you were a child?
Like high school, maybe. Yeah, high school. And then I didn't, I was in such denial that I would say no. And I had girlfriends, even though I guess looking back at it now, I probably wasn't probably interested in them in that way. But when I went to college, my freshman year, I didn't act on it. My sophomore year of university and college, I acted on it. And I went to a gay bar by myself to try to like figure it out. I had a fake ID and I was 20 and like, I'm going to go try to figure all this out and see like if there's anything. And then I went and I felt grossed out. And it was the middle, like you said, of the AIDS crisis. I walked in and thought, oh my God, I just breathed all this air and all these people in here have AIDS probably. And I ended up making out with some guy in the parking lot. And I said, oh, what do you do for work? And he says, oh, I work at this company. I'm like, oh shit, that's where my dad works. And so I'm like, this is done. My dad's going to find out. He's going to tell my dad, but the company was so big. I don't know what I was thinking. And then 2 weeks later, I went back and found there was a friend that I worked with, because I had a part-time job in college, and he worked at this company, and he was in there. He's like, I knew I would see you here eventually. And I'm like, I'm not gay. And he goes, okay. And he kind of rolled his eyes. I'm like, maybe I'm bi-curious. He's like, okay. Then I went through my bisexual phase. And then,
Well, can I just say, so it's interesting. In order to survive, I would deny it to the kids at school.
same.
But I never denied it to myself. And weirdly, I know there's a lot of talk about gay shame, self-loathing, and a lot of my books cover the journey. I mean, they all have different plots, different characters, but deep down, they cover the journey from gay shame to self-knowledge, self-acceptance, self-love.
Yeah.
Deep down, I always respected myself for being gay. I was always outraged other people didn't accept me. It seemed like an injustice that everybody hated me for it. And I had this determination, an actual self-respect, I think. But it was interesting hearing you talk about going out on the scene for the first time, because we go to something called sixth form college in the UK, where 16 to 18, before we go to university, what you call college, we go to a bit more of a senior school. And the one that I went to was on the outskirts of Manchester, so much closer to where my small towns were. So when we started going out, I found myself those allies, those girlfriends who would come with me. And in the early 90s, there was suddenly this change, and gay was becoming fringe cool, outsider cool.
Yes.
You had Madonna Vogue, the Blonde Ambition tour, the Truth or Dare film. Those things were happening, and it was never mainstream, but there was a cool to it. And we started going out. But listening to you talk about it, I've written lots of scenes in my books about this, because I think it's really important. Often straight people will ask gay people about our coming out story. I think the first time we stepped out into the gay scene is hugely significant. I was excited. I was relieved. I was sexually turned on. I was repulsed and terrified. I was ashamed of myself. There were all these things going on. I thought I'd found my people, and I felt like I'd come home, but I thought that meant I'd given in to something I'd been trying to suppress. I'd let myself down and I was going to die. We all were told gay meant AIDS and dying.
Yes.
And For my parents, I think I totally understand their point of view that they were frightened for me. They didn't have any hope that there was a positive outcome possible.
Yeah, and I remember the first time I like had sex with a guy. I went home that night and I like scrubbed my body I had radiation, like I was in a radiation. There was a movie, I can't remember what movie it was, where this woman was scrubbing herself with like a wire brush. I wasn't that bad with a wire brush, but I remember just like scrubbing my body with like a washcloth because I'm like, oh, I feel so gross like from this. Like I loved it at the moment when I was in the moment of having sex, but when I came home, I'm like, oh, I was just with a guy. Like do I have AIDS? And then I was like, it was just,
Oh, I totally understand. And actually, obviously I write novels, so I'm in that world. And I saw a load of critics the other day talking about a straight novel about the experience of first love and attraction at school, at high school. And all these straight critics were saying, oh, this author really captures it. What an amazing experience. He captures it so perfectly. And I had a flash of anger that innocent experience has been taken away stolen from so many of us, because
yeah,
us discovering our sexuality was fear, self-disgust, and actually another thing you said earlier, that terror of other people finding out. When you were in the closet, I mean, like I say, I started telling people at 17, 18, but
mhm,
which that, in the early 90s was a big thing. But the more people who knew, the more unsettled and frightened and anxious you felt, because the more people could blab your secret. If people found out your secret, because I'd grown up having the shit kicked out of me, being called every name, I thought if everybody knew, they would go back to hating me again. And actually, another thing, Zach, when I started going out onto the scene and met people, there was only one type of gay on offer, and that was the loud, flamboyant,
yes,
into fashion, saying outrageous things, having sex with people, and entertaining all your straight friends with stories about
yes,
blowing somebody in the toilet cubicle,
yes,
and actually, I was quite a quiet, creative, sensitive, bookish, intelligent, academic gay. But I ended up having to play, I just thought that was what gay meant. I had to play that role for a while. So it took me quite a long time to work out who I really was. And I think that's why this theme of self discovery and trying to work out who you are comes up in so many of my books.
yeah. I mean, I remember I was so ashamed of it because I denied it for so long. And whenever told the first person, it felt like, wow, that felt like a relief to me. Like, I'm like, oh, this, because I trusted them. And I knew they wouldn't tell anybody. And then I felt like I had to tell somebody else. And then I would tell somebody else. And then I would ask them, well, what do you think? What if I told this mutual friend of ours? They're like, oh, they'll be fine with it. And I never had a bad react. I never had a bad reaction. I only had one friend I had a big friend group where she paused for a moment, and she's like, "Oh, okay," and she was okay with it. And we were great friends for years afterwards. But yeah, she was the only person that I can remember that really. I don't want to say she had a problem with it, but I don't think she was totally okay with it either. So
And for us, there was so much at stake. We were terrified. We thought it could be the end of everything. So that little pause, every little pause, every little expression on their faces, we were holding on to everything and interpreting it because we were just terrified. There was
yeah,
everything at stake. And let's not forget that it was only a couple of decades before then that it was made legal to be
yeah,
gay. I mean, in my country, it was 7 years before I was born. And in Scotland, just to the north of England, still in the UK, it was the early 1980s. Um, these attitudes were shocking. And actually, I am a bit more angry about it now because I do feel that innocent self development and going through those stages were stolen from us,
yeah.
and the older I get, the more angry I get about all the shit we have to put up with, that we just take for granted because we're grateful that people accept us, because we were so terrified they'd want to hang us from the town hall square.
Yeah. I think when I turned 50, though, I think I let a lot of that go where, and also if people don't accept it now, I'm kind of like, fuck you. Like, I don't care. Like, that's how I feel now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not like, I think with my podcast, I push the boundaries sometimes with things I talk about, but I feel like but that's where I do it. And if people don't like it, they don't listen. That's how I kind of feel about it. So if I want to talk about, I just did an episode where I'm talking about the different phases you go through whenever you are a gay man. And I talked about kind of like where I started. I think I started like around the 6th grade or 7th grade, where I was trying to, I had these thoughts about guys, because when you're starting puberty or whatever, and I was like trying to suppress them. But we didn't have the internet then to like look things up and to see what it meant, or to look at porn, or to look at anything like that. So I kind of talked about that journey of what gay men or me as a gay man, what I went through. And then I said, like everybody goes through their own journey. Lesbians go through a certain journey, transgender people go through a certain journey. And I kind of talked about, like what I think, everybody's journey is so different.
Well, and also, things like ethnicity, things like social class,
yes,
come to play. And for me, I had a disastrous love life in the sense that I was always looking for love, but I, as I said, became one of those gays. I just thought you had sex with everybody and you talked about it, made it all into a joke. Actually, I always wanted to meet someone, and it took me till the age of 44. I did, and when I married. But one thing I wanted to say to you about that was my now husband, only came out the year before he met me. Oh. He had a very different story because he has passing privilege. He can pass for straight. Mm-hmm. And that's called a privilege. But what it actually meant for him, growing up in quite a religious, culturally observant Jewish community where he didn't really know any other gays, he had the option of staying in the closet. I never had the option. So I had a horrendous time at school, just constant insults, verbal, physical abuse, violence. But what it did mean was I dealt with it earlier on, and I got to self-knowledge, self-love much earlier than my husband, who stayed in the closet for much longer. And I'm not sure, when I think about it now, that's a privilege, actually. I've written about that in books as well. I'm not sure that's a privilege.
And we'll be right back. Okay, now back to the show. Yeah, I'm happy with my journey. I'm glad I went through all that I went through, because I think it just made me a stronger person. My husband's actually Jewish and very straight passing as well, and probably didn't need to come out of the closet if he didn't want to. But he, oh yeah. I mean, when I met him, we were 25, and he said that he was bisexual, but he was in a relationship with a guy for like 2 years before me. And I said, you're not bisexual. He goes, no, I am. I'm like, okay, you go through that phase, because everybody maybe needs to go through that phase, or whatever your journey is, that's fine. And now he's like, I mean, he's still could be straight passing, but he's a totally gay man. And, when we first met, he was a Republican, actually, in the United States, which is like, very, and it's because his uncle was a Republican, but he didn't believe in same-sex marriage when we first met. He's like, oh, I don't think gay people should get married. I'm like, what? This is way before.
Residual shame there. There's some residual shame there. And, actually, can I just interject quickly to say that I do know, I accept what you're saying, that a lot of gay men go through a phase of identifying as bisexual.
Yeah.
But I never did that. I think I always knew that would be unfair to myself. And I think I also always knew that there were bisexual people, and using their identity to take the edge off what I needed to tell people to make it
Yeah.
slightly easier wasn't fair. I think it's quite hard for bisexual people that often gay people say it as a first step towards coming out as fully gay. Although, having said that, there's also gay people who are genuinely confused and think they're attracted to women at that time. Not the lead character, the supporting character in my new book, The Castle of Stories, was married to a woman. And because when he had sex with women, he could enjoy it in the moment and he felt good about himself because he could be normal and prove to himself that
Yeah.
he actually confused that with genuinely enjoying it. So I do think there is a lot going on, but I wouldn't want to go on without to continue without just acknowledging that there are
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
sexual.
Absolutely. I mean, I slept with women also because I was trying to like figure things out. So, yeah, I mean, I don't regret it. I mean, it was what it was. But I think whenever I only slept with two women. Whenever I slept with the second one, that's whenever I think that helped made me realize like, oh yeah, this isn't for me. So when you started university, you went to Cambridge, and
Yeah.
that's where you realize people really don't care about your sexuality. Is that accurate?
Not quite. I went from state schools, public schools, as you call them in America, that were quite rough. And I just worked really hard. I didn't know. Deep down, I always wanted to be a novelist, but there's a saying, if you can't see it, you can't be it. I didn't know how to get that. I didn't know anybody who worked in the creative industry. I just knew that I worked really hard at school. That's how I got praised. That's who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And got into this top university. And when I was there, did meet a lot of friends who accepted and celebrated me for who I was. But this is after having a few years going out in Manchester in the gay village on Canal Street. I got to Cambridge and I met intelligent people, educated people, other creative people, actually. And that was great for me. And from there, I went into a career in the media, partly because I used to make TV documentaries, but partly because it was safe. There were other gays. The world, or my world in the UK, was getting much better.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say I went to university and found out that nobody cared. I mean, there still was a lot of prejudice, and there still was a lot of prejudice. It was just getting better, and I knew how to avoid it, and I knew how to fight, and I had my allies, and supporters. So, yeah.
I want to talk about your career because I think it's interesting what your career was. So you started at Channel 4. You were the first culture editor, right?
Well, I made documentaries. I made documentaries for ITV, which is a big network channel here, behind the camera. And there were arts and entertainment documentaries. There were profiles of writers, actors, singers, performers in every area. And after that, I went to be the arts and entertainment correspondent on a national news program, Channel 4, which is another network channel here.
Yeah.
So, and it was interesting because obviously I'm very gay presenting, and, talking about prejudice, the reason why I had to point out to you, it wasn't that I suddenly discovered everything was fine, because what I discovered was people loved gays to go out with and get drunk with and have let's go clubbing and let's whereas actually once I was on TV, on broadcast news, on a quite serious program, admittedly my brief was the arts and entertainment desk, but it was the early days of social media, 2010 to 2013, and the insults I got. Who is this camp, effeminate queen? I can't take him seriously. He shouldn't be news reporting. It was a barrage day in, day out. And I actually had a lot of very nice comments from viewers as well, very supportive viewers. But they really hurt because they reopened the old wounds and took me straight back to the school playground where I'd been told all this. And yeah, I found it really hard. And then actually after that, I was the editor-in-chief of Attitude, which is the main magazine for
I mean, you've done a lot of great things. You wrote novels, you were a broadcaster, you were editor-in-chief at Attitude. I mean, how does the publisher identity feel different from all those other things that you did before you started publishing books?
Well, here's the thing, Zach. I always wanted to write books. I didn't know how to do it. So I was doing all these jobs in the media and gradually working my way towards writing on the side, finding out how to do it, finding an agent, meeting publishers. But when I started my early days of writing, I didn't want to tell straight stories. I only wanted to tell queer stories. And every agent and then every publisher rejected my books over and over again. And they all said they're too gay, mainstream readership will not care, it's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And again, that opened the old wounds. Yeah. This was what I'd been told when I was growing up. So when I was the editor of Attitude magazine, I crowdfunded my first novel.
Awesome. I love that.
And there's a big crowdfunding publisher in the UK called Unbound. And I went to them and I said, I don't just want a crowdfund novel. I said, what's your record? They said 14 days. I said, I want to break the record. I want to do it in 7. And I gave my homophobic rejection letters to the national press. I went on TV, the breakfast show here, the big breakfast show, Lorraine Kelly, and I kicked up a stink about the homophobia in this book. Got crowdfunded really quickly and then was published and became a big hit. And which is great because after that I got a traditional publishing deal and I got a traditional publishing deal in America, all of which was fantastic. The book sold brilliantly, but I had to fight and fight and fight to get there. And all along I was told, no, you're too gay, your book's too gay, the mainstream won't like you. And I think I just got determined, and there was always this fire burning, Zach. There was always a fire burning, and I always felt wronged. I felt the injustice really keenly and wanted to fight it.
Yeah. But do you feel like, I mean, now that you've had all the success, you've written these books, you've had some great positions in your career, do you feel like do you feel satisfied, or do you feel like that you won?
That I won. Well, I sometimes feel exhausted by the fight, but about 18 months ago, I got a letter from the Prime Minister. I don't know in the US if there's any equivalent, but we have something called the honour system here, where you get medals from the king. Mm-hmm. The top of the honour system is to be made a sir or a dame. I mean, you're very aware of actors who are Sir Ian McKellen, Dame Judi Dench.
Yeah.
One of the big honours is an MBE. And I, about 18 months ago, got a letter from the Prime Minister to say I was going to get an MBE for services to LGBTQ plus culture. And that came out of nowhere. And when that happened, I'd still been fighting and fighting and fighting, even though my books were doing well. I had to fight for marketing budgets, everything. And when that happened, I did think, fuck you, actually.
Yes. Good.
And that's when I had the idea of setting up an LGBTQ plus publisher myself. My new book's but it's in the UK actually, so I've still got my traditional deal in America, but the new book, The Castle of Stories, we've published here in the UK, and my publisher's called Pansy because that's one of the insults that was directed at me as a child. Mm-hmm. We've reclaimed the slur and as an act of empowerment, and my new book has just come out as the first one from Pansy. We've signed another author already. We're about to sign a few more, and that's going to happen from next year onward. So,
I mean, I think you have to reflect back on that MBE a little more And think about how amazing that is and the changes that's happened since the early 90s and how they're now recognizing you. I think that's quite an accomplishment that
Well, should I tell you what, Zach? When I got it, and it was actually the Prince of Wales, Prince William, who gave it to me. And I went to Windsor Castle to get the medal with my mom and my husband. And people kept saying to me when I did interviews with journalists around the time, they all kept saying, "Is this a dream come true?"
yeah.
And I said, you have to imagine when I was growing up how much everybody hated gays. There were no gay writers, there were no gay books, or very, very few.
Yes.
And the idea that I would be going to Windsor Castle to get a medal from Prince William for writing gay books, it wasn't a dream. I just, like I said, if you can't see it, you can't be it.
Yeah.
I could not see that at all. And I had to almost invent my own path towards it. And I sometimes look back at some of the jobs I've done, making documentaries for 10 years and being an arts correspondent on the news. I think, what was I doing when I actually wanted to write books? But it took me a while to work out the path and invent it for myself, because I didn't know where I was going or how to get there.
Yeah. And we'll be right back. Okay, and now back to the show. Let's talk about the Castle of Stories. Let's talk about the book itself a little bit.
Woo!
Yay. So for the people listening, he's showing the Castle of Stories. And tell me about how you got the idea. Like what's the idea that you got to actually start writing this book? Like
This
what
is the
spawned?
American cover. So it was spawned by a few things. The books that I've written in the past. So I did a book called One Love that was successful. And that was about two gay men over 20 years, blurred boundaries between friendships and a romantic sexual relationship and how they negotiate that. One of them secretly in love with the other. And without giving too much away, the conclusion is that as queer people, we shouldn't just be following templates from straight society. We can invent new relationships that fit who we are as individuals and respect our authenticity and uniqueness. And I wanted to write about queer families in the same way that that it's a privilege for queer people, that queer means alternative, it means different. We're not expected to follow the template. We can invent something different for ourselves. I wanted to do this with families. And so it's about a gay couple who get together in their 40s. One of them has just got divorced from a woman and has 3 children from that relationship. And it's about how they, with a lot of drama along the way, how they work out, create a new family that works for them. And another catalyst was I wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle, which has been my biggest seller, especially in America. And that was about a man in his 60s, a shy, lonely, secretly gay, closeted man who has a few life crises, and they make him think, right, I've got one chance to turn this around. I want to grab happiness. And he knows the only way to do that is to set off in search of the lost love of his life, a man he hasn't seen for 50 years. And that was a big hit. And that was partly because what I did in that book is I wanted to contrast when he goes looking for, he's been hiding away from the world for years because you don't know why, but he was torn apart from the love of his life 50 years earlier when attitudes were different. And he's been very shy about opening up since. And when he sets off to find his lost love, he encounters a world that is much more accepting than the one he remembered. But with flashbacks, I contrast this modern accepting world with a past tense timeline in which you see the prejudice and persecution he went through with his boyfriend, and you discover gradually what happened to them. And I've always been really interested in queer history. I'm a patron of LGBT History Month here. And I am fascinated, Zach, by how historians can deny our existence and our story in the past because queer people in the past had to live in secret. They had to destroy all evidence or else they would not survive. They'd lose
Yeah.
their jobs, they'd end up in prison. So little evidence. I mean, if you look at creative figures like Tchaikovsky, Hans Christian Andersen, Leonardo, Michelangelo, we know they all had relationships with men. Do historians acknowledge it? No, because, for example, Michelangelo, he had sonnets about a man. His great nephew, who inherited, changed all the pronouns. Hans Christian Andersen, stories like The Ugly Duckling, The Little Mermaid were all analogies about his feeling of being an ugly duckling, people hating him, falling in love with a prince he could never have, all of these things. But, you know, there's so little. I mean, there are a few letters from Hans Christian Andersen, actually, but there's so much that is denied because there's no evidence. And I wanted, in the new book, you asked what the inspiration was. I wanted to tell another past tense story from an older gay opening up history. So one of my characters in this new couple who've got together, creating a family unit, one of them goes through letters belonging to a great uncle he didn't know about, who was estranged from his family, and he finds out about the secret gay past of this great uncle.
I love that.
These secrets allow him to move on from trauma in his own life.
Yeah.
And, you know, I wanted to show that actually, if there's little evidence from upper class artists, there's absolutely nothing on the record from everyday working class people who lived in small houses with no privacy from their families.
Yep.
They didn't keep diaries, they didn't write letters. And I wanted to tell a story of somebody like this. Actually, he did write letters. He was a teacher, but that was one of my catalysts for writing the book, because I feel really passionately about that, as you can tell.
Yes. You know, I think it's really amazing that you're doing these queer stories now. I don't know what it's like in the UK or in Europe, but in the US, there's a lot of book bans that are happening. You know, we're in this political moment now where they're taking all these LGBTQ plus books out of libraries in certain states or certain cities. You know, if it was up to the current administration that's running the country, we would have no LGBTQ plus books at all in any library. Do you see the importance of what you're doing, and that the reality that you started Pansy, and that you can kind of put more of this literature out there for people to do? Like, you're really like doing something for the world by doing this. Has that kind of hit you yet?
Yeah, it's absolutely why we're doing it. And also, my husband wanted to make a contribution. I think we've set up Pansy together. He's a businessman, so he brings that to the table. And obviously, my knowledge of writing, publishing, he's a big reader as well, actually. But yeah, there is absolutely a political edge to what we're doing, which is why we reclaimed a slur as the name of our publisher. Yeah, we are going in all guns blazing, and it's a battle and we're fighting.
And for the queer writers that are kind of listening, and those who are maybe sitting on a manuscript and they've had this rejected and they've been told to stand down on their identity, what do you want to say to them?
Absolutely don't. It's not true. We've been fighting this battle. Thankfully, Heated Rivalry has come along.
I know. Isn't that amazing?
Amazing. It's made our job much easier. That's one of the reasons we just went for it with Pansy, because it's blown out of the water this argument I had for years and years in traditional publishing, which was that straight women would not connect with gay characters and would be repulsed by gay sex and turned off. It's absolute bullshit.
Yes.
And it's really helped. But I want the next Heated Rivalry to come from a queer author. Also, I should say that Heated Rivalry was not published in the UK until after the huge success of the TV show. So, yeah, there's absolutely a political edge to what we're doing. There's a political motivation and ethos. And I think when you get older, Zach, when you get on the other side of 50, you just don't want to fuck around anymore.
Yeah.
You know, let's just fucking do this.
I agree. I love that. That's how I feel too. Let's just do it. I wanted to ask you one question about your book being like the characters based in Tuscany. Is that somewhere like what? Why Tuscany? Was it somewhere that you've been in love, or like how did you pick that?
I married a man who inherited. This is where the idea came from. I said I wanted to write about older characters. I wanted to write about families. Um, I married a man in my 40s who inherited from his father's cousin out of the blue a secret hideaway in the mountains in rural Italy. And I don't want to give away too much of my
Yeah.
husband's relative story, but you can imagine what the thrust of it was and why he wanted to retreat to a safe space, and which is hidden away in the mountains. He left it to my husband when we got together. I mean, fuck. Can you imagine you start dating a guy, he tells you he owns a castle, a farmhouse, and an olive grove in beautiful Tuscany? I mean, I couldn't believe it. And also,
You were like score, yes. Like
I know. And it's beautiful. It's very, very old. It's very run down. We don't have the money to renovate it, but it's very romantic. And it's 1,000 years old, parts of it. And I walked through it and I think of people before me, hundreds of years ago. What were their dreams as they were walking around? Who were they in love with? Who were they
yeah,
arguing with? Were there any queer ones? There must have been,
yeah,
hiding away their letters and their secrets. And that kind of, as well as having a beautiful romantic setting that was just created for a novel,
yeah.
that got the novelist brain and the creativity, the wheels turning.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Okay, now back to the show. I want to talk about something I seen in your Instagram. So the Chester Bookshop event that you just happened to do on June 10th. Tell me about the energy around the launch at that event. How was that?
So I'm on tour at the moment because the book's just come out here in the UK and is doing well. I'm doing lots of events, meeting readers, being interviewed like this in front of readers, signing their books, meeting readers. And it's great. So many readers come up to me and say they stopped reading because they didn't feel seen and now they feel seen. I have
Mm-hmm.
so many straight women coming to me and saying, your book about older gay characters in my
Yeah,
books made them think about their gay uncle, their gay brother, often gays who didn't make it. And that can be quite, you can have a sad moment of
yeah.
connection. I've done quite a few events and I'm midway through the tour. I've got a lot more to come. I'm in London tomorrow, Brighton on Thursday. Yeah, it's great. I love meeting readers. I love hearing their stories.
I think it's so interesting about the women because watched the first episode of her first half of Heated Rivalry, and I'm like, I don't think this is for me. It's like soft porn. I'm not into it. And I had two of my friends that are women come to me like, "Oh my god, I love this show. You have to watch it." I'm like, "Really? You're watching it? It's like a gay man show." They're like, "It's so good." And so they're the reason why I started loving it, why I ended up watching it and loving it because they two women. And I can't believe like on the internet and social media how I see there seems to be more women that love Heated Rivalry than it is gay men. So it's just I can see why women love your stories also because they like a love story.
I think there's lots of theories. One theory is that women, when they're reading a romance, they want emotionally expressive men. And often rom-coms for straight people are about men who struggle to express their emotions,
Mhm.
or they're not as emotionally expressive as the gay ones. There's something about straight women, if there's a straight woman character, they put themselves into her shoes and they can stay a bit detached
Mhm.
when they're reading a male romance, and that can be more fulfilling for them sexually. They can let themselves go a bit. Remember
Mhm.
that women are so slut shamed for
Yeah.
enjoying
Yeah,
sex.
yeah.
And I also think, to be honest with you, Zach, I think it's just about higher stakes. If you look at so many straight rom coms, they're very low stakes. They're
Yeah.
quite dull. And
Yeah.
actually, if you're talking about queer rom-coms. In the case of Heated Rivalry, these two athletes could lose everything, especially the Russian one, if they were found out. And there's so much at stake, and there's so much personal journey that they've gone on, the emotional depth and the, going from a place of shame to a place of self-love, trying not to be gay, trying to straighten themselves out, all these things. There's just so much at stake. And when you're a writer, you look for drama and emotional depth, and you look for emotional intensity. When you're a reader, you look for drama and emotional intensity and depth and high stakes. And to me, it makes sense.
If people want to get your book, tell them how they can get it. And I also will put that in the description of this video or podcast as well.
Thank you very much. My latest book, The Castle of Stories, is out now in the UK and the US. In the US, it's published by Kensington, stocked in all your regular bookshops and all your online retailers. Same in the UK, it's published by Pansy and available everywhere. So,
is it on Amazon? Do you know if it's
Yes,
Amazon?
Absolutely on Amazon. Also in ebook, audiobook.
Awesome. Did you do the audiobook yourself? Like, did you actually?
No, an actor did it and did a much better job than I could do.
Okay. That's amazing. Well, I am buying the book as soon as we end this podcast, and I will put it on my Instagram.
Thank you.
But I'm so happy I got to talk to you. I think just your honesty and just your story of growing up, and then how that all kind of came into you being such an amazing author and putting these great stories out. We need more queer history out there, and I'm so happy that you're delivering this. So I'm so happy I got to meet you and proud of you for doing this.
Thank you, Zach. I'm proud of you for you're amplifying our voices. The work that you do is also important. So thank you, and please keep doing it.
Thank you so much, everybody. If you are hearing this story and it resonates with somebody please share it. But go out and buy The Castle of Stories by Matt Cain. Again, I'll put a link in the description of this podcast so you can get it. And then come back and leave a comment and tell us what you thought about the book, and share it with your friends and tell them to get it because it's out now. And I'll put links to your other books as well. So thanks so much for being on, Matt. You're amazing. I'm so happy I got to meet you.
Thank you, Zach. Me too.
Don't forget to go and buy Matt's book. Thanks, everybody, for listening.